efforts to solve the problem of whether or not to legalize medicinal marijuana began as far back as 1937. Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act, which effectively criminalized marijuana. In 1952, 1956, the Boggs Act, the Narcotics Control Act, were both federal laws which set mandatory sentences for drug-related offenses, including marijuana. The first offense, marijuana possession, carried a minimum sentence of 2 to 10 years with a $20,000 fine. Conservative parents groups soon began lobbying for stricter regulation of marijuana and the prevention of drug use by teenagers. Some of these groups had the support of the DEA and the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and eventually led to the 1980s War on Drugs. In 1986, President Reagan signed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act, began mandatory sentences for drug-related offenses, along with the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. This new law raised federal penalties for marijuana possession and dealing, based the penalties on the amount of the drug involved. Possession of 100 marijuana plants received the same penalty as possession of 100 grams of heroin. President Bush declared a new war on drugs in 1989. 1996, California passed the Compassionate Use Act, and since then, more states have moved to legalize medical marijuana, and consequently, states are beginning to legalize the use of recreational marijuana. Over time, law enforcement, parents, and medical professionals have created various clubs and organizations on the state and national levels to argue against the legalization of medical and recreational marijuana. Prior efforts to solve the problem include federal criminal prosecution, civil liability, or professional sanctioning, such as loss of licensure or credentialing for physicians who prescribe or dispense medical marijuana in accordance with state's law. Patients who use medical marijuana as permitted under state law have faced criminal or civil penalties. In 1970, Congress repealed many of the mandatory penalties for drug-related offenses. It was evident that the mandatory minimum sentences of the 1950s were harsh and were not helping to eliminate the drug problem in America. In 2006, the FDA announced there were no sound scientific studies that supported the use of medical marijuana. In 2014, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo signed an executive order making small amounts of medical marijuana legal in New York State without the need for a public referendum. Recent passages of laws in other states show that marijuana, either medicinal or recreational, will eventually become legal in all 50 states. The clinical research is ongoing, and many questions still need answered. Efforts are being made to pinpoint which types of marijuana are needed to properly treat certain diseases. The issues become even more complex because marijuana can have mold, bacteria, and fungus, which can cause a patient with an already compromised immune system to have even more problems. Pesticides and other chemicals used on some marijuana plants can also be harmful to people with weakened immune systems. The debate over medical marijuana affects all walks of life, from children to the elderly, from lawyers to farmers, from healthcare workers to pharmaceutical companies, from local governments to the federal government. There's a lot at stake if we legalize marijuana for medicinal use. The issue must be examined from social, scientific, medical, and economic perspectives.